Hello there and welcome to Redstone Academy. This is Redstone 103, Power Components Part 1. In Redstone 101 we talked about redstone dust and powered blocks, and we're going to build on that foundation quite a bit in this episode. So if you don't understand those concepts or you haven't watched that video, I suggest you go back and watch that. In Redstone 102 we talked about redstone repeaters, and we're going to rely on those a little bit less, although we will use repeaters a little bit. So you might want to watch that video as well. In this episode we're going to talk about ways of generating redstone power. We talked about the lever a bit in the previous episodes, and I chose that as an example because I think it's pretty easy to understand how it works. You just place it down and then you can right click it to turn it on and off, and it will power adjacent redstone components, anything like that. We also talked about the fact that it will strongly power a block that it is pointing in towards. So this lever is pointing in to this block right here. This block is strongly powered, so it will power redstone dust. Redstone components, anything like that, will be powered by the block itself, not just the lever. The lever will power adjacent redstone and redstone components, but a block that it's pointing into will as well. And you can place it on the side of a block, on the bottom of a block, top of a block, it doesn't matter, but it only works on the block that it's actually attached to. So it's not attached to this one right here. So this is not powered at all. So not even weakly powered. It won't even power a redstone component through it. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. Only the block that it's actually pointing into. And we also, the redstone that is adjacent to the lever will also be powered. So we can see here it's on the side of this block. So it's not getting power through this block. It's actually getting power from the lever itself. And it's getting power, and we can see here an example where we've got a lever. We've got redstone components that are right next to it. We've even got dust that is underneath it. It's one block down, but it's actually on this block right here, or another redstone component or redstone repeater that's pointing outward from it. These are all being powered just by being adjacent to this lever right here. And these are properties that most, if not all, of the power components are going to have. So this right here, the will power adjacent blocks. So we can treat this as though the block that this lever is in is strongly powered. It's not technically considered strongly powered, at least in the nomenclature that's used by the wiki, and we'll talk about that a bit later, but it has the same principal idea that the air block that contains this lever acts as though it's a strongly powered block. So it will power any adjacent redstone or redstone components. Any redstone power component that is activated, turned on, will have this property that any adjacent redstone components to the actual power component itself will be powered. And the other property that most power components have is that if they point into a block in some way, and a number of them will, some of them don't and they won't have this property, but the ones that point into a block will strongly power the block that they're pointing into. And that's what we see right here, and we'll see that with several other redstone power components as well. The button is another redstone power component that shares a lot of properties in common with the lever, but it's got a few properties of its own. The first that you'll notice is that there are several different types of buttons, whereas there is only one type of lever. So there are stone buttons and there are wood buttons. There's actually many different types of wood buttons. There's a wood button for every different type of wood, and there are only two types of stone buttons. There's the stone button and the fairly new blackstone button. The blackstone button has the same properties as the stone button, and all the wood buttons have the same properties as each other. So the other property that buttons have that levers don't is when you press them, they will remain active for longer than just while they're pressed. So the stone button will stay active for 1 second or 10 redstone ticks. The wood button will stay active for 1.5 seconds or 15 redstone ticks. So if I press them in, that didn't really work. So if I press them close together, you see they both went out at the same time, but I pressed this one first. It's only a half a second difference, so it's kind of hard to see it, but it's definitely there. Another property that wood buttons have that stone buttons don't is that you can shoot them with an arrow, and it will remain powered for as long as that arrow is on it. So it will despawn in a minute, or you can walk up and take the arrow, and then it's no longer powered. That also works with a trident. but neither of these work with stone buttons. That's me pressing it from a distance. There we go. And then if I come and take the trident, it's no longer powered. Other than that, buttons have basically all the same properties. They will strongly power a block that they're facing in towards. You can place them on the top, bottom, sides of a block, and they will strongly power it. They will not power blocks that they are not attached to. So they're powering this one, not powering this one. They will power adjacent redstone, just like this. And we can see the same basic thing right here. It's powering all these components right here, just like a lever does. Here's a few practical ideas of where you might include a button or a lever in a redstone component. So you might place it on a wall like this with the redstone dust behind the wall. So when I power the switch, it powers it right there. You could also place it underneath like so, and then run the redstone dust to wherever you wanted. If you wanted a solid floor with a button or a lever on a block above it, you could do something like this, where you're powering this redstone dust, and then behind it, you've got a redstone, because the redstone dust is going to power this block right here, and you can pull a redstone repeater signal out of that, and then you've got a nice solid floor. You can even close this off, and you're still going to get that signal. We push the button, you can see that's powered. You see that's powered as well. I'll open this up so you can actually see inside of it, but there's a practical example. And another thing, if you wanted a button or a lever that's on the floor, you could just come down a block and have the redstone dust underneath it like this. And this works as well. I'm going to forego talking about crafting recipes from this point forward because that information can be found in-game, but I think it's still important to talk about where objects can and can't be placed. And buttons and levers generally follow the same principles as far as placing them on top of blocks as redstone dust does. In Java, there is just one exception. You can't place a button or a lever on top of a hopper for some reason, but you can place redstone dust on top of it. But other than that, all the properties in Java Edition are exactly the same. In Bedrock Edition, buttons and levers can both be placed on top of fences, walls, hoppers, and can even be placed underwater without affecting them. None of this is true for Java Edition. But you can also place buttons and levers on the sides of blocks. And obviously, you can place them on the side of a solid block just like normal. But you can also place them on the side of observers. Sometimes it's useful to place them on the faces of observers. I've used that from time to time. You can also place them on top of chorus flowers. Not particularly useful. I've actually had to use string to prevent this from growing. So I don't recommend trying to use this. You can place them on the side of soul sand. Again, soul sand for the intensive purposes of redstone is considered a solid block. And you can place them on side of composters. You can also place them on open trap doors and doors, although I don't recommend this because activating them will break them. So it is possible, but doesn't work particularly very well. And you can also place them on the side of ice. You cannot place them on the side of cauldrons or any other partial sided blocks or anything like that, or on the sides of leaves. And you can also place them underneath blocks. So normally you can place them under a solid block, no problem. Place them underneath farmland, not a problem there. Lecterns, and portal frames, composters, soul sand, same thing. This is a grass path, ice. You can't place them underneath leaves or any other non-solid bottomed like this enchanting table right here. And it's worth mentioning that when you do place them on the side of a non-solid block, they will not power through that block. So composter, same thing. You can only take the signal from the lever or the button itself like that. But soul sand, again, is treated like a solid block. Next, we have the pressure plate, and there are 4 different types of pressure plates, each of which has their own properties. So there is the wooden pressure plate, of which there are several different varieties. There's one variety for every type of wood. There is the stone pressure plate, of which there are just 2 varieties, regular stone and black stone. There is the light weighted pressure plate. There's just one variety, and it's made out of gold. And there is the heavy weighted pressure plate. There's just one variety of that, and it's made out of iron. Now these 3 right here, the wood and the 2 stone pressure plates, will always register a signal strength of 15 as long as there is anything on top of the pressure plate. Now, the wood pressure plate will actually count item entities as well as player and mob entities, but the stone pressure plate will not register item entities. It will only register players or mobs. So mobs can trigger a stone pressure plate or a wood pressure plate or any of these pressure plates really. Now the gold and the iron pressure plates, or the light weighted and heavy weighted, will put a signal strength based on the number of entities that are on top of it. So if I drop a bunch of items on this one, you'll actually see the signal strength go up, but you'll also see it go down because as the items stack together, a stack of items actually only counts as one item entity. So it will only count it as one. So it would take a lot of different types of items or a lot of mobs on this pressure plate in order for it to register more than one for any given length of time. And then the iron pressure plate, the heavy weighted pressure plate, will actually count in groups of 10. So it's basically impossible with just one item for me to get it to register. You'd need 11 different items on top of this pressure plate in order for it to register a signal strength of 2, and then you need 21 items on it for it to register a signal strength of 3. I've never really used this property of heavy weighted pressure plates, but it's there if you need it, if you need to count a really large number of items, but it'd have to be a whole bunch of mobs or different types of items before it to even register a signal strength greater than 1. And the gold pressure plate, that just counts in individual items, so that'll actually tell you specifically how many items are on top of it. Pressure plates only really point into the block that they are on top of, so they will strongly power the block that they are on top of, but they will not power at all any of the other adjacent blocks. And just like the other power components, they will power any adjacent redstone or redstone components that are adjacent to the actual pressure plate themselves. And one of the most practical uses of the pressure plate is to just put it on top of a block and have the redstone dust underneath that block, and then use that to power whatever redstone components you want to use. Pressure plates will go on top of any block that you can place redstone on top of, but there's also a number of other blocks that you can place it on top of. Many of these aren't super practical for redstone, although anybody who's into design Minecraft will recognize some of these little tables and stuff like that. They're definitely very useful for that, but since you can only get the redstone signal out of the pressure plate itself when it's on top of a non-solid block, many of these are not super practical for actual redstone. Next up, we have the redstone torch, and at first glance, it might appear that this just generates redstone power, but it's a little bit more complex than that. It does generate redstone power, but instead of powering the block that it's on top of, it actually draws power from the block that it's on. So if I were to power this block right here, the redstone torch actually goes off. So what it does is it inverts the signal of whatever it's sitting on top of. So this block is powered right now. Weakly powered, strongly powered, doesn't matter. This one just happens to be weakly powered. So it is powering this redstone component that's on top of it, and it is actually turning it off. And if it's not powered, then the torch is on. So it will invert the signal. Whatever it's on top of, it will invert the signal. And it doesn't matter how strong the strength of the signal is. A signal strength of 1 is still enough to turn the redstone torch off. But if I bring it out 1 block, and we've got a signal strength of 0, then the torch is on because this block is not powered. But if I move it in 1 block is now powered, and the torch goes off. Now, a redstone torch will actually power the block above it, so it'll draw power from the block that it's on. So if I actually power this right here, the torch goes off, but it will power the block above it, and it's only the block above it. So you can see this block is strongly powered by the redstone torch, and we've got redstone dust coming out of it. And so the redstone dust is powered, but this adjacent block that's right next to it is not being powered. The redstone dust or a redstone repeater, doesn't matter. It's not strongly or weakly powered. It's not powered at all. There's no power coming to this block right here. Like all other redstone power components, a redstone torch will power any adjacent redstone dust or redstone components. So this redstone repeater right here is being powered by the redstone torch. The lamp above it, we can place a lamp beside it as well. These are both being powered, and can see underneath we've got redstone dust underneath the torch. This is actually a pretty common application to have a redstone torch and then place redstone dust underneath it and run the signal that way. And also of note is that this block right here, anything in the block, anything adjacent to it will be powered. So that means the block in front of it as well. So it might not seem like it would power this repeater, but it definitely does. It'll power redstone dust, it'll power a redstone component. Doesn't really matter as long as it's adjacent, and this block is adjacent to the redstone torch, so it is being powered. One thing you can do with redstone torches is what's commonly called a torch tower. So you can see here, this block right here is not being powered right now, so this torch is on, which is powering this block right here. So this torch is off, which is not powering this block right here, so this torch is on. And if I flip this switch, now this torch is not being powered, so this block isn't powered, so this torch is on. So I've just inverted the signal all the way up. So this is a useful way to carry a signal up in a very small amount of space, because all it takes is the torch tower right there, and a very small amount of space. There is a small amount of delay. Every redstone torch adds a 1 redstone tick or 1/10 of a second delay. It's not super obvious right here. You can kind of see it, but it might be a little more obvious here, where you can actually see it happening. Just a little bit of a delay. And this is basically just a different configuration of the same thing, where we've actually got it on the side of a block, and that's powering this block right here. So this torch is off, which is not powering this one, so this one's on. And if we switch it, then they all switch around. And you can even mix and match them if you wanted to, but a lot of redstone people tend to be neat freaks, so this is pretty disorganized, and they might use something like this if they can. But there might be situations where you need to run redstone in some pretty weird configurations, and so it's important to know that you can do stuff like this. Redstone torches can be placed anywhere where you can place a regular torch, which includes most of the places where you can place redstone, except you can't put it on top of a hopper, but there are a number of other blocks that you can place it on top of as well, and you can also place it on the side of a number of blocks as well. Note that if you place it on top of or on the side of a non-solid block, then it will always be powered, because you cannot actually power the non-solid block, so the torch will always be on. Next up, we have the block of redstone, and at first glance it might appear that this is just constantly powered, and that's actually true this time. The redstone block is just a block that is always transmitting a redstone signal. It will power any adjacent redstone dust on any of its 6 sides, so it'll power on top, on the side, or underneath. It's also considered a partially transparent block, so redstone will actually go up the side here, but if I remove that, you can see that it is actually powering the redstone underneath it, and it will power any adjacent redstone components, but it will not power any adjacent blocks. So I said that when a redstone power component points in towards a block, then it will power that block. But the block of redstone has no directionality. It doesn't point in towards any blocks, so it does not power any blocks. So this block right here on the side, not powered. This block on top, not powered. This block underneath, not powered. It will only power adjacent redstone dust and redstone components. And the most common use of this is in conjunction with a piston, because these are actually pretty expensive. They cost 9 redstone dust to make. So if you need a constant power source that doesn't move, then a switch or a redstone torch are much cheaper alternatives. But the advantage of this is that you can move it with a piston, which you can't do with most of the other power sources. So you can see here, we can use that to create a redstone signal over there. We'll talk about this at some more depth when we actually start talking about pistons, and then even more when we talk about more advanced circuits. And it's also worth mentioning that a redstone torch, either on top or on the side of a block of redstone, will stay powered for just 1 tick, and then it will stay unpowered forever, because the redstone block is actually powering the redstone torch, so that will turn it off. And the redstone block is just a regular block, so there are no placement restrictions. You can place them in air or whatever, doesn't really matter. So these are the most commonly used redstone power components. There are still quite a few more, but I'm going to save those for a part 2 so that this video doesn't get too long. I will do that video at some point in the near future. I think I might actually do a video on comparators before that, and then we'll go back to power components after that. So look for those videos in the near future. I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this and found it educational. Bye now.